Welcome back to the program. Onto this now. On the sidelines of the ongoing UN General Assembly in New York, His Majesty King Mswati III announced a funding of $5 million, which is equivalent to 86 million emalangeni, towards the Africa Strategic Investment Alliance, the A.S.I.A. The alliance aims to mobilize transformational funding, strengthen partnerships across the continent, and drive Africa's economic growth, of course. But what is the anticipated impact of this contribution on Eswatini? Economist A.S.I.A joins me now virtually to share insight into how such moves position the country. A very good afternoon to you, Sibiya, and thank you so much for your time. This catalytic funding, they call it. Just your thoughts. How does it position us as a country? What does it say or signal rather about our economic priorities?
Thank you, Notsile. Good afternoon to you, and also a good afternoon to the viewer. I must say that this is one of many that we've seen the kingdom leading in terms of, cementing Africa's role in the global development and actually in the global south. I mean, if you recall back, I think 5 to 8 years ago, we saw Eswatini, pledging around the same amount to the Global Fund, and that was by far one of the biggest that African countries actually could pledge into that fund. And what we saw coming after that was, Eswatini just ramped up, and we reached 95 in terms of HIV. So what that signals to me is the fact that, the causes that His Majesty puts his full weight behind, such that even in the global landscape, in the global theater, in the global political theater, you see him there playing, ensuring that, Africa takes part of the brunt in terms of solving Africa's problems instead of waiting for development finance to come from abroad. So I would then say that Eswatini continues to be that global leader which champions, co-funding from the global south in terms of our global development. And I think this leading role in this catalytic fund or this seed fund that we've put into that A.S.I.A partnership has actually cemented that role. And you would then expect that also we should see more or less the same movements in the domestic economy when upon His Majesty's return. We should see, a bit of a shift and a push towards that microfinance landscape and that financing for SMMEs and that financing for our youth businesses. So for me, it's both the global political theater, while also we should expect to see some changes in the domestic configuration of things.
In accordance with Asia's structure, their mandate is also to support small businesses, youth and women in the kingdom, and of course in the continent. But given these objectives, how do you think this funding can then be translated into tangible economic benefits for the local people?
So what we are looking at here, Notsile, is specific focus to underserved populations. And I mean, if you look at the fact that overall in Africa, we have around a $330 billion financing gap. And mostly when we lack that access to finance, it's usually the youth and women, and our SMMEs seem not to somehow tally to the global banking infrastructure, which would then allow that access to finance. So what we are seeing through this A.S.I.A partnership and conglomerate is a shift towards bridging that gap. So what we are going to see happening right now is financiers across Africa coming to think around how can we fund an African program within an African banking infrastructure, right? And what you need to bridge that gap is such partnerships where we have money that's not going to, follow the same guidelines as the money that would have been raised through shareholders and capital markets, and thereby we will be bridging that financing gap for our SMMEs, and most particularly women and the youth, who in most cases would lack the right collateral and the right documentation to access finance, as it were. And you would see that this partnership is structured in a way where you have both private sector and the governments coming together to come and build a new infrastructure, a new financing modality for African businesses. So what we are then going to see, Notsile, is we should see a lot of women and children and youth coming into play in the business landscape, and also getting the finance they need to grow their businesses to a level that is going to be sustainable and pulled quite a number of Africans out of poverty. And what we note with this, the targeting of this partnership is it targets those, demographics that would make a bulk of Africa's demographics. Africa is poised to reap what we call the demographic dividend. If you look at the population structure of the entire continent, it is largely a youth population. And we know that overall, when you look at the gender distribution, women would always make up, say, around over 50% of the population. So targeting those demographics, Notsile, is actually targeting the future growth for the continent. And also we expect those to trickle into the region now that into the domestic economy, now that His Majesty has taken the lead on that global on that global stage.
Speaking of partnerships, Sibiya, how do you think Eswatini's active participation in this alliance, can enhance, well, also considering that we do have economic ties with other countries in the continent, enhance or rather see the country leveraging our position when it comes to the much talked about AFCFTA?
So what I envisage from this partnership, Notsile, is number one, we should see a lot of global south to south learning, where we take best practices from across the continent, both within private sector and also the public sector and quasi public companies, and then we somehow reshape that and see what we can work best for Eswatini in terms of bridging the finance gap. And then in terms of moving in concert towards, leveraging and taking advantage of the AFCTA, one of the things that are critical for Africa to be in a position to take advantage of the AFCTA is actually access to financing. And as we've already stated, there is around a $330 billion gap in terms of financing for African projects, across the entire continent. So what you need for us to be able to trade is you need that catalyst to come into play. And this partnership will not only just catalyze access to finance, Notsile. One thing we know financiers are being quite strong in doing is that ability to form those linkages, between companies in the different countries where they have a footprint, and see what can be replicated in another country. So this will also close the technological gap within Africa, because what we're seeing right now for the first time is more of an insular look into financing problems within Africa. So that means now we are going to take a closer look and zoom in on the issues of access to finance and the technology that is required to ensure that we can give finance to a lot of African SMMEs and the youth and women in particular. So this partnership will catalyze and can also leverage from the AFCTA.
Finally, every year we do see His Majesty travel, and he does go abroad. He makes certain commitments that then will have a positive impact in the countries such as these. Do you think this is one of those that then could reshape our long-term development trajectory, especially when it comes to attracting international investment?
Thank you, Notsile. So what I'm looking at the very first, we should expect as soon as His Majesty lands, we should actually see domestic financiers moving in concert and taking leave from what His Majesty has already done. And we should already begin to see that bolstered finance towards SMMEs, the youth, and women in particular, because His Majesty has already given cue in the global theater. And then also in terms of of this development financing, what this also speaks to us, to the world, is Eswatini's commitment to sustainable development. Because if you look at the A.S.I.A partnership, it also focuses on, green, on the green revolution in terms of those green investments, and that actually aligns with with our plan of action in the kingdom, and that actually has its own type of investor. So we should see those investors coming into Eswatini, because this is a very strong signal that says Eswatini is transforming and Eswatini wants to go green. So if you want to go green, it is actually going to be the best place for you to come and invest in Eswatini.
Sbia, we just can never thank you enough for your insight, but we still have you with us. We'll have a look now for our market analysis.